Hello, my name is John Dickie. I wanted to take a few minutes to introduce to you two men, both of them national heroes in Italy, who struck history making blows against the Sicilian mafia. And in doing so, they really refounded the discipline that I devote a lot of my research time to, and that is understanding, historically analysing Italy's mafia organisations. Here are the two men in question: Giovanni Falcone on the left as we look, and Paolo Borsellino. This is the last photograph of the two of them seen alive together in March 1992. Falcone and Borsellino were both Sicilians, both childhood friends from Palermo, the Sicilian capital, and both anti-mafia investigators. Now, it may seem strange that a generation ago, when they started work, people didn't know what the mafia was. The academic consensus was very confused. The idea was that mafiosi were mediators of some kind, even if they were occasionally violent. Their origins were lost in the mists of Sicilian history. One thing people seemed certain of was that mafiosi were not members of a single criminal organization. All of that began to change in the summer of 1984 thanks to this man, Tommaso Buscetta. Tommaso Buscetta was a murderer, an international drug dealer, and a member of the Sicilian mafia. Many members of Buscetta's family were murdered in an internecine mafia conflict in the early 1980s. And he decided that his only way to survive and get back at his enemies was to tell everything he knew about the Sicilian mafia to Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino. Buscetta told Falcone and Borsellino that the Sicilian mafia was actually called Cosa Nostra, meaning our thing. That's what the mafiosi themselves referred to it as. And Cosa Nostra was a secret brotherhood, a hierarchical organization where individual members, known as soldiers, were grouped into families, little cells of the organization, if you like, and the whole organization was ruled over by a body called the Commission. And each individual member to join had to go through an initiation ritual, which involved dripping blood and burning the image of a saint and swearing the oath that you can see on the screen. Using Buscetta's evidence, as well as volumes and volumes of other evidence about drug deals and murders and all sorts of goings on, Falcone and Borsellino put this picture of Cosa Nostra to the test in one of the most important trials in Italian history. Hundreds of alleged members of the mafia were in the dock in a specially built bomb-proof bunker courthouse. And this trial was known as the maxi-trial, held over nearly 2 years between 1986 and 1987. One of the men on trial in the maxi trial, even though he wasn't in court because he was on the run at the time, was the then ruling boss of Cosa Nostra, Totò Riina, known as Ucurto, meaning Shorty, a man responsible for hundreds of murders and the mortal enemy of Tommaso Buscetta. Now, Riina, the most wanted man in Italy at the time, did everything he could to block the judicial progress of the maxi trial. He murdered judges, he murdered witnesses, he pulled all the political strings at his disposal. But in the end, in 1992, he failed. Italy's Supreme Court confirmed the guilty verdicts in the maxi-trial, and more importantly than that, they approved the picture of Cosa Nostra as described by Tommaso Buscetta. The Sicilian mafia existed from the point of view of Italian law. Shorty Riina responded in the only way he could at the time, in a desperate effort to reassert his power, in two colossal bomb outrages in May and July of 1992. He murdered Falcone first and then Borsellino. Along with them died Falcone's wife and their bodyguards, all of whom had volunteered to protect these heroes in the struggle against the mafia. But this turned out to be, in a sense, a defeat for the Sicilian mafia. They had lost the maxi-trial. Totò Riina, Shorty Riina, was captured the beginning of the following year, 1993. And ever since then, more and more progress has been made in the fight against the Sicilian mafia. Giovanni Falcone in particular left a colossally important legacy. Italy today has national structures for fighting the mafia, including the DIA. You can see the logo on the bibs worn by these men, which is the sort of Italian anti-mafia FBI. And all of these were created towards the end of his life by Giovanni Falcone to extend the methods that he'd used in his investigations right across the national territory to fight all of Italy's mafias wherever they were found. And that's really the secret of the progress, the steady progress that Italy has been making in recent years against the mafia organizations. And the work of Falcone and Borsellino, particularly the results of the maxi-trial, were a very important lesson for historians. For one thing, they raised some really interesting questions. If the Sicilian mafia exists as a single organization, when did that organization begin? How has it survived over the years? And what can we learn from the history of the Sicilian mafia about the history of Italy's other major mafias? I'm thinking particularly of the ndrangheta, the mafia of Calabria, which is the region in the toe of the Italian boot, and the camorra, which is the mafia of Naples and the area around Naples. And that's where I come in. The documents like the ones that you can see on the screen here are trial papers from the 19th century, the kind of materials that allow us to reconstruct where these organizations came from and how they have evolved over the years. So the research that I do in that field feeds into my teaching. I teach a course on organised crime to final year students. And it feeds also into the dialogue that I have with members of law enforcement and investigators in Italy today, and campaigners against the mafia and journalists, because they will certainly tell you that in order to understand the mafias, you have to understand their history, which now covers about 150 years. And that makes for a really, really exciting field of research where you've got a constant dialogue with people in the front line fighting the mafia. So if you want to know a little bit more about it, you can find more about my books and my work on my website listed here, or follow me on Twitter. Thank you very much.